joining us. I'm Jennifer Haynes, and I'm here talking with Christopher Matos Rogers, and we are talking it through with Jennifer today. And today we're going to be talking about green energy, green sustainable housing, social justice, and Christopher's pet topic. He's the founder of Adopt Georgia, and it's a fully inclusive adoption support group. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit, and we're also going to be talking about his work as a real estate agent with Palmer House Properties. Christopher, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more.
Yes. Thanks, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here today. So as you said, I kind of wear a couple hats. I'm big into sustainability, really increasing visibility of that, and then foster care and adoption, because my husband and I have adopted from Georgia Foster Care. And I love, because I have a bridge between the two, because so much in sustainability is also a social justice issue. So bringing those two things together so we have a fully equitable future.
Okay, so before we talk about Adopt Georgia, I want to really talk about what it means to have a greenhouse, sustainability in the housing market. I know nothing. I know we've done a little prep work for this, but I really didn't ask any questions about this because I know nothing. I want to learn. So not just for my own sake, but for my son's sake, how does this work in terms of middle class or lower middle class communities? Let's start first with what does it mean, and then talk about how it affects different communities.
Certainly. So in its basic form, we have two things of practices you can do at your house now that are lower cost but have huge effective savings. Something as simple as LED light bulbs. They're very cheap now and they have a huge payoff. The other end of the spectrum is higher entry, but that could be Energy Star, Earthcraft certified, LEED certified homes. So the actual building, the envelope is tight, it conserves that energy.
Let's go back. What do those certifications mean?
Yes, so Earthcraft is a local one done by South Face Energy Institute here in Atlanta in combination with the Atlanta Home Builders group. Energy Star is a national one as well as LEED. We see fewer LEED homes because they're more involved. But basically what that means is that your home is energy efficient. Not only are the appliances using less, but the big thing is your envelope, as we call it, which is the seal on your house. So the walls, the insulation, the windows, the doors, there's minimal leakage. In fact, these homes are so tight at times that you have to have additional ventilation added to make sure that there's enough airflow.
Okay.
So.
Is this something that only happens in new construction, or is this something that you can add to your existing home?
Both. It is more prevalent in new construction. Not all new construction is energy efficient. That's the really important thing to realize. Most homes are built to code, and a sustainable home, high performance home is the term we use, is built just above code. And it isn't necessarily very expensive. One of the great things that a lot of people do is air duct leakage. You can reduce your heating and cooling costs by up to 30% just by making sure that if you have ducts, say in your attic or maybe a crawl space, that they're properly sealed so you're not leaking air into that area.
Wow.
And there's a lender that did a great study here locally. I believe it was with D.R. Horton, that for about $300 per home, they could have better leakage protection around their ducts, and for $300, and
Wow.
and you would have that greater reduction.
That is very affordable. And so you don't know what that entails exactly because you're not a contractor.
Well, it's easier. Well, you can do it retrofit. So, there's new construction, but then the bigger opportunity is with existing homes. And we're seeing this happen now, and it's going to happen more. City of Atlanta just passed their renewable energy plan. By 2035, we're going to be powered 100% within the city limits of Atlanta by renewable energy. And a large portion, about a third of that, is actually going to be achieved by reducing our needed energy. So that's going to come from increased energy efficiency, and the greatest opportunity is with existing homes. So there are low-hanging fruit you can do without tearing your house apart. Something like, if you do have ducts like this, making sure they're insulated, making sure that they're sealed around where it comes into the wall. This can be done with tapes, with foam, spray foam, and then making sure that the plate is on there well.
Oh wow! And then what? I know everybody knows to change out their windows, but that's a chunk of change.
That is a bigger one, and actually, if that's all you do, a lot of times you don't see the benefits because, again, pressure changes. And so if your walls and other items are leaky, you've just kind of shored up your window, so now it'll push harder out those other leaking points. And windows are expensive, so is it something to do? Sure. but there's definitely things you can do before, and maybe look at that in combination with some of these other items, like having insulation added after the fact. That can be done just by having holes drilled in the wall and they blow in insulation that way. So there's some
So
real
you don't have to
easy
take
ways.
it down.
Correct. You don't have to. If you do, you can be a lot more effective and do the spray foam in the wall. But obviously, that's part of a bigger renovation. Which, if you are doing, that's really
the time.
big. That is the time to do it. And renovations are happening now because the real estate market is up. So if you're going to do it, look at that. And there are great lending programs that allow you to take in these additional energy efficiency upgrades, and they actually take into account your reduced energy burden on a monthly basis. So they can look at that on like your DTI, if you will, your cost of living. So there are some great programs as well.
Oh, wow. So, and if you do even some of these minor things, just doing the seal, because now I'm going to look into the seal on my own home, because I never even knew.
And this is like an 80s, 90s home.
89.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
That's when we really transitioned to man-made construction materials, right? A lot of the plywood, stuff that's made up from fiber. And so they can be the biggest offenders at times.
Oh, wow. So the other thing that we were going to talk about is how we can use this movement of sustainability to affect people across races and across economic groups, because even $300 can be a burden for some people if you're living hand to mouth, as I do regularly. So tell us, how does moving into a green or a more economically friendly or environmentally friendly space, how does that help people across race and economic?
So I'll break it into two groups. Okay. I do want to give credence to what is already happening and what's out there that people can take advantage of today, but also talk about what we need to do as voters to vote in people that are going to really make the change that we need. And part of it will be driven by City of Atlanta, because there's even though they've passed this legislation, they're now going to have to lobby for some additional efforts to make other things happen to actually reach their target. So currently, for low-income folks, there are some programs that are starting to disappear a little bit. For low-income individuals, there are some nonprofits that work in the space, but probably the biggest one is energy companies like Georgia Power. They do have rebate programs, especially the greatest ones do go to low-income individuals. Okay. And those folks are important because they usually have the highest energy burden, where they live in older, leaky homes. Even though they may keep their thermostats higher or lower, right, to try and use less energy, again, we're going back to that envelope. Their homes are just leaky. They have old, inefficient equipment, and often, we have one of the highest energy burdens in the country. Even though we have low cost of energy per kilowatt hour, we use a lot more because of our climate, from the humidity and the heat to, again, old building stock.
I didn't know that.
I think we're like number 3 or 4. So again, even though we have, you'll hear the PSC, the Public Service Commission, tout, well, we have low energy rates. Well, that might be the fact, but our usage in the South is huge, and particularly in Atlanta. So we have, and Atlanta has the highest income inequality in the country. So a lot of things people would think the Bay Area, but no, it's right here in our backyard. So we have income inequality, we have high energy bills, and that really brings in legislation. So the Public Service Commission it got some news press, if you will, this year. It's like the job that nobody knew about that we elected. And it's made up of, I believe, 5 members, if I'm remembering correctly, from across the state. They are by region, but then the whole state votes in every region. So, and that's sort of why we keep going back to where we go, because of the classic urban-rural divide, Republican, Democrat. And these folks are largely in the pocket of the energy company, Georgia Power. And they conserve that status quo. And so some of the things that we need to do is to get more progressive candidates in there that are going to push Georgia Power to put more money behind these programs. So that would be like the rebate programs, because that's what the PSC does. The PSC says you have to put X number of dollars into programs to increase energy efficiency. Or the big thing is solar. Because right now solar is very much a rich white person's ability. Things like community solar, where people can pool together and put it on. Maybe they're in a condo or there's just not space on a roof, but if there's a plot of land nearby or the condo roof where they could put it and share it, and they could share it. That's actually outlawed by Georgia law right now.
It's outlawed.
It
so
is.
in the floodplain areas in some of these communities where they could conceivably put something, or even on our golf course over here, where you could conceivably find a spot and put some solar, we couldn't do that as a
You
community.
could not do it because the way that the code is written, and this is again falls in the PSC, is that the only person who can sell a kilowatt hour of energy is the utility, and so other states have got this, and again, we've got to get people that are going to stand up to the utilities, and again push these forward-thinking ways of doing energy. Other states and other countries are running away with this, and they're doing well. And we're being able to make sure that clean energy and cheap energy, because that's the other thing. Solar is now on cost parity with fossil fuels, if not cheaper.
Now, I have heard, and I don't know if you know this or not, but I've heard when you hear about Germany's almost 100% using renewable energy, but I've heard that that's not actually that's not actually true, that it's not as efficient, that there are brownouts and blackouts, and it's just not as great as what they're touting in Germany. Have you heard anything about that?
So I will say that they are not 100% every day. What you kind of see headlines get made or is that maybe they will produce enough energy on certain days that between wind and solar, the country generated enough power by those renewable sources that the country was powered that day, or maybe a series of days. Portugal made the news several years back because I mean there was like a prolonged period of days where they were able to power themselves on renewables alone. But some of the brownouts and blackouts, I don't know for sure about that. I haven't ever heard of that, so that you get a lot of oil industry spin on some of this stuff. Okay. And so that also has to be kind of filtered out, and it again, because they're trying to distract us from this. But Germany's actually doing something really awesome, and we have their North America headquarters of that company, Sonnen, in here in DeKalb County. Mm-hmm. So they are selling a battery solution. It's more expensive than Tesla's, but they use it in Germany where they will create like a mini grid, so neighbors they'll all have it on their house, and so if the power goes out or if there's a surplus, they can sell power to each other. We could never do that in Georgia
because that's illegal.
Yes. So those are kind of the things we look at is, when we talk about battery storage too, that really solves the puzzle, because wind and solar, obviously they fluctuate. They're not always constant. But if we can save that power in a battery and then use it when the sun is down or when the wind is not as strong or blowing, then we can even out those peaks. And that's really the greatest potential now that batteries are finally coming online economically.
Do you have any idea what the prices are?
Yes. So there's installation costs are a part of it, so it all depends. But Sonnen is I think about 10,000, so it's pretty hefty. And then the Tesla, they've kind of changed because they're production constrained, they can't make enough. I think we're up to like 7,000 or 7,500, and then there's some installation costs. But if you pair it at the same time as you're doing solar, then you would qualify for the solar tax credit as well on your battery, which currently through the end of 19 is 30% of the purchase price.
Have you switched over?
I have not, and the reason for me is that I, like most people in DeKalb and Atlanta, I have a lot of trees around my house. So it's kind of cutting trees down is not really the best option. We are going to cut some down because they are a little too close to the house and they're looking a little dangerous. So when we do that, we will add solar as well. When I bought my house in 2015, right before I became a real estate agent, I was not aware of some of the financing programs where you could wrap solar into, installing new solar on your purchase, whether it was new construction or not. I didn't know about that.
I didn't know about that either, because I bought a house 15 years ago. Yeah.
And it's been around since 93, so even then it was a thing.
So right now you can wrap your, if you're a first-time home buyer, you can wrap converting your house to solar into your mortgage.
Yes.
If you are savvy enough to do it. So that is one way.
It's having the right lender.
But that's one way for a lot of lower income people to become more green in a way that they can put in there, because we're talking about an extra $20,000 on a loan over 30 years. It's not that much money.
Correct, and you're going to see that savings immediately on your bill. And again, these are those loans that take into account, okay, you're going, and they're able to model this and say you'll save about this much a month on your energy bill, but your payment's only going to go up this much. So it can also qualify for you. Let's say you're buying a house, because most people do. They do end up buying their house at the top of their approval rate. So maybe you don't have enough room in there for solar, but if you do one of these energy efficient mortgage EEM products, and there's conventional FHA and VA versions.
Really?
FHA is the best as far as being flexible.
Really?
You could throw solar on and it's 100% financed. So that's the other great thing. FHA is a 3.5% down payment, but when you do these energy efficient upgrades, they're 100% wrapped into your loan.
Wow.
So
That's fantastic. So people think that, I don't make enough money, I can't afford it. You could even say, look, I might get something a little bit cheaper than I would have bought or ordinarily, but then I'm going to add this $20,000 or $30,000 to become energy efficient, and over the life of my loan, I'm going to be doing way better, and your house is going to appreciate greater, because that is where people are moving.
correct. And
No one wants to buy my leaky house.
Well, and the big thing that's going to change is the backup batteries, because how often do we have storms that come through every year. We get a rogue hurricane comes through and knocks power out. And a sunny day, a tree will fall here in DeKalb, and your whole neighborhood loses power. So, and if you work from home, like I think you and I both do, you have kids, oh my gosh, the internet goes down,
The world has come to an
So
end.
imagine having instantaneous battery backup power. So it's essentially a clean generator instead of having the natural gas one going in the backyard. So that's immediate payback. The first time that you're working from home and your power goes out, you're going to like that you bought that house or had it installed at the time of purchase, a solar array with battery backup.
And as a realtor, how do you encourage your clients to use these services? Do you tell them, is this something that you kind of push, or do you let them ask you questions?
So I let people ask me questions. My identity and who I am goes so much into my real estate career, because that's largely why I got into it, to bring wider visibility to some of these issues. So naturally it comes up, and whenever anybody's buying a house, they do think about total cost, especially younger buyers, because they're buying for their first time and they are concerned, what is it going to look like on a monthly basis? So it almost always comes up, and we can talk more about this. But that's another piece too, is really educating the realtor market, because there's old preconceived notions about what solar is. Does it hurt property values? Does it actually pay off? Does it work? I mean, that's the biggest thing. People don't think these things work. So we're doing a lot of work to educate our other realtor members so that they can help us grow this market and support consumers, because that's in our code of ethics. Article 11 is to properly represent clients. So if you're selling a house that has these features, I can't tell you how many times I've had people call me because they were connected through an organization in this way, and they'd already signed an agreement to have their house listed. So there's only so much I could say to them, but the story was along the lines of, I hired the biggest, baddest agent in Brookhaven, and that person told me that I needed to take the solar off my house because it doesn't add value. And even though that's a top performing agent, they just broke Article 11 of the Code of Ethics because they didn't know about that. And just because they never sold a home with solar, or they're going with outdated, beliefs, they're not properly representing their clients. So we are working really hard to get in front of these homeowners so they can be properly represented.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about social justice and how your work in this space of, as a realtor and working with environmentally friendly issues, how that has affected your view and what you've been doing with social justice.
Yeah, certainly. So for me, really getting into the sustainability side of real estate also lined up when my husband and I adopted kids from foster care. And so that's been an eye-opening experience, getting to deal with social systems like schools, mental health, healthcare, DFACS itself. And a lot of these services, these kids are housed in South Georgia, rural parts of Georgia. So I've gone to places that I never knew existed, like Roberta, Georgia. And getting to see what these people actually experience, what the kids experience, the reasons that they're in foster care, has really opened my eyes to more of that system. I grew up white, middle class. My dad was in the Air Force. We lived in Europe for a few years. So I did get diversity exposure, and my generation, I'm an older millennial, we get it more. We grew up more diverse than other folks, but I still was insulated in the way that I wasn't poor, and my school was largely white. We had.
Especially if you're in Germany or Europe.
Yeah, well, and I grew up in Snellville. So
Yeah.
at that time, it shifted very much during my high school year. South Gwinnett really changed over those 4 years. But, my lifelong experience, I didn't get to see. And I was in the gifted track. I now know that, gifted and AP classes are another way of segregating our schools because they are overwhelmingly white. And so, my children that I adopted are not gifted AP kids because they haven't had the structure at home to encourage education, place a value on it. They have often been in, some of the poorest performing, poorest supported schools, and they've been pushed through, instability, multiple placements. So I get to see the result of that and how we get people where they are. And the saddest thing for me is kind of this opinion that so many people have of that's somebody else's problem. And like I say now, is somebody else's kids, they became my kids. They became my reason to advocate. And that really changes not only your knowledge, a lot of it is seeing it. It's not that I was a horrible person before and now I believe differently. It's just that I got to see it and experience it and have it right in front of me and see just how so many systems in our country create this. And the apathy that so many of my friends and neighbors and fellow loved ones have towards, because it's somebody else. And it's like, these are people. We are limiting their human capacity, their ability, their future life. And almost this thing of, we just want them to be somewhere else.
Do you think that because the media portrays these others as people of color more often than not, when in fact that's not the case, do you think that also perpetuates that kind of this is the other?
I think so, and sadly, like my children are white, and there's a lot of white poor kids in foster care. That was actually surprising. Going in, I thought it was going to be largely people of color, and the number of white kids was really shocking. And I do, and I think that's one of the rural urban divide. The white rural people are suffering greatly at the hands of their elected officials from jobs, lack of health care. I mean, when you start getting into the number of health facilities, lack of OBGYNs, therapists, and psychiatrists, large numbers of counties in Georgia don't even have these services. And that's where these families and kids are largely coming from. And to see that, these people are, again, we're talking about at least I'm still white. At least, life is bad, but at least I'm still white. But this is affecting, a lot of people. So it's not just people of color. And I think it's been something that the people in power have used to make those poor whites feel safe because, well, at least you're not black, or this problem is, for people of color. And it's farthest from the truth, and really trying to connect with those folks and try to figure out how we can get them to see how life could be better for them, getting them jobs and education and health services.
Do you think that one of the things that I'm from West Virginia, which is a rural state, and it is predominantly white. One of the things that I see as a real divide is the fact that as a people, those of us in urban centers, and by that I do mean people of color in urban centers who are living a very poor life. For whatever reason, I don't think it's all race. I think part of it is race. But there's another kind of a disconnect between that group and poor whites in rural communities. And maybe it is that at least I'm better than you, and so I don't need those services, so I'd rather cut off my nose to spite my face. But I also feel like there's something else that we're missing in reaching out to people so that as we can unite over socioeconomic issues. And I don't know what that is.
That is a tough one, and it's sort of something that I've been mulling over a lot lately. I will say that us in the cities, we tend to have this approach of they're voting against their own self-interest. Right. And number one, that's attacking of them. We're never going to get anywhere with them if we essentially call them dumb and ignorant and doing things like that. I mean, because the truth is, like, me as a white man that, I'm not rich, but You're not uncomfortable. Correct. The things that I would vote and support for, higher taxes and taking care of people and welfare, essentially. The thing that I think that we, being proactive instead of reactive, the ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure, that is technically against my own interests. But I'm not a selfish person. You know, I realize that we have to do better for our society. So a lot of it is the messaging to those folks. And I think, you know, the people that represent them, Trump, you know, they do talk about those things. They do talk about, hey, you don't have jobs. You know, the opioid crisis has been latched onto, and trying to at least talk about those things. Now, they don't deliver on them, but nobody else is really on I would say on the left side is giving them human value. They're not talking about them either. And things like the Green New Deal, honestly, that's a lot of the solution for a lot of these issues. But they're being, you know, AOC, a woman of color, is
That's
running
right.
that. So
Yeah.
she's another.
And
And this is all about.
And how can she understand my position? She's from New York.
Yeah.
And so there's just we've got to find some Democrats in rural communities that can go out and talk
We
to
do.
them.
We
I
do.
mean, that can talk their language.
Because the facts are there. They're very clear as day. And these people are living it. So, you know, I've seen it kind of talked about as like the kitchen table issues, right? So what are the issues they're talking about? And they are. It is healthcare, as we saw with Obamacare when it passed, to 2010 at this point. You know, the Democrats really didn't defend it or call it a victory, and it was very controversial. But, you know, even 2 years into the Trump presidency, when he had Republican power
He
and
could not do
everywhere, he could not do it, because now that people see what's possible, they want it, and they want it more.
They want, and I want it more. I am a 2-time cancer survivor. I can't get insurance outside of the exchange. I won't be able to until September.
Oh, wow.
So I have to have, if the exchange were not there, I'm completely uninsurable. September,
Yes.
I'm 10 years. So
But see, but that's sad that you have to think like that. I mean, nobody should lose their life over healthcare. Nobody should choose going to the doctor or feeding their family. That's just, I mean, we say we're the best country in the world, but what's
yeah,
there's nothing amazing about that. That's really sad.
it is sad. It is very, very sad. So before you leave, because I know we're getting close to the end of our 30 minutes, I want to talk about Adopt Georgia, how you founded it, and what went on, how you got to that point.
Yeah,
And what your membership looks like and everything.
Yeah, certainly. So Adopt Georgia started. I used to say I hated starting things. I always felt like, you know, you'd be like, I wonder if there's a group for this, and it'd be like, no, but you should start one. And that's actually what our adoption caseworker told me. But I didn't do it. You know, I had so much going on. But in early 2017, I did start a small little group because we had met other families during the process, and it's like, hey, let's communicate, let's share our experiences, let's, you know, pool our knowledge, because there was no adoptive parent support group. So as people went through the process, they just kind of disappeared and went along their life. But there's so much knowledge and experience that we can provide for others looking to go through the process. So it started as that, and we grew. We had about 50 people in it when we started. And over the course of a year, we grew. I think we had about 200 members after the first year.
Wow.
And then 2018, we had the adoption bill that came up last year, where they were essentially, religious freedom is what they called it, which would have been very hurtful to not only the large number of kids looking for parents and families and stability, but also at a minimum, you know, discouraging and limiting the options for single parents, parents of different religious faiths, gay parents, from being able to adopt. And so I started speaking up more about it, and again, bringing visibility to my family and our experience, and that, hey, we're here and we're all here to help you support it. So as of 18, it really shifted more. We still have again, sharing and gaining knowledge together, but really, again, increasing visibility, because it is largely shown as a heterosexual Christian, white or black families adopt, right? 2 parents, white or black, straight, Christian. But the kids aren't all that, right? And we don't have enough families. The solution is not being solved that way. And so, you know, we bring visibility to try and encourage Hispanics, Asian families to adopt, single parents, LGBT. There's huge untapped potential in the LGBT community, because so many of us believe that we can't, that we're not allowed to, that it would be difficult. And we have now, for 2 years, recruited at Atlanta Pride alongside DFACS and the DeKalb Foster Parent Association, and it has been their largest recruitment event both years. So the first year it was very like volunteer thrown together. They didn't put any money. They just gave us some swag. They did staff it, which is great. But the second year they bought 2 booths. You know, they put money behind it, and it just shows the ability of when you engage people that you're not engaging, you can really grow that community. Because we do have a crisis nationally and here in Georgia with the number of kids in care.
So, wow, that's just fantastic to hear that those community organizations really stepped up next year. So when's the next event for you guys?
We don't have anything planned at the moment. We will probably do some family cookout gatherings over the summer. That's usually easier for people, just like other families, you know, soccer, school practices. So school year is kind of hard for us.
Can you talk about the adoption process a little bit that you all went through and what that was like? And because I know you're an interracial couple, aren't you all also interfaith? I think.
Well, so we're both Jewish.
Okay.
But there are a lot of interfaith couples that do go through it. But you know, but it was not a concern. It was definitely a topic that we had to cover a lot with folks because there was concern of, you know, how are we going to support the children's beliefs if they didn't match ours, and were we going to let them go to church and things like that. So you know, that's something.
And you all actually decided to adopt older children. That was what you were looking for, right?
Not in the beginning. So that was part of the process too. The process takes a while, you know, 6-12 months at least to get through the point where you're even talking about, you know, hey, here's possible kids for you. You know, it's training, it's the home study visits. Ours was very fast. You know, our caseworker called us go-getters, which we very much are. And so we got through the process in about 6 months, and we actually got state approval the same day that we were at an event and met our eventual kids. So, you know, ours was very quick. So it's one of those things of, you know, and I say in the group all the time, you know, you have to advocate for yourself, because there is a belief that these agencies that are working for us are our advocates. But when you're doing with foster care, really what they are is they're contracting with DFACS as an extension of DFACS because of a labor shortage. So they are there for your best interest, but they're not fully. It's not like a lawyer with an attorney-client relationship. They're still technically working for the state.
So you went to the event. What was that like?
You know, so the first one is really creepy because you kind of feel like a pedophile because, you know, there was a great movie, Instant Family, that came out last year. Mark Wahlberg made this funny comment when they had to go to an event, and he said, you know, any other time you're in a park talking to random kids, that would be a negative. But now they're encouraging you to do it. So you're going to this event, and there's just all these kids, and I don't work with kids, so I work with adults all the time. So first of all, I'm like, how do I talk with kids? So there's a lot of adjustment that first time. You feel awkward, you got to get on their level and talking, but once you do it once, like with anything, it's a lot easier.
So it's almost like going to a store. Then you go in, there are a bunch of kids, and you kind of talk to the ones to see which ones you like. I mean,
it's kind of similar, yeah.
That is so.
But they work. They do work.
That is yucky, though. For like, what if the kid doesn't get chosen? Like, it's like standing up we're picking teams.
And there's many of these kids because the kids that come to this are, you know, there's when we throw numbers out there, we say there are 15,000 kids in Georgia foster care. Well, most of those are, you know, in and out of the system. You know, their parents or their family situation changed, that we're getting supports in there for their family, and then they can go back home. But there's it fluctuates, about 400 kids at any moment in Georgia that are free and clear for adoption. They are not being reunited with their parents. Is what they call TPR, termination of parental rights. So these kids are literally waiting for a family to give them permanency. Those are the kids that go to these events, and they're usually 11 plus. They're the older kids, the kids that are much harder to find a family to adopt, because most people want a baby, you know, or a 5-year-old, something like that. So it takes a really special person to be willing to take on a teenager at any age. And a child that has had obviously not a great life up to that point.
Okay. There's been some sort of trauma, so that's what leads them to this point, which is just so. How did you get to the point where you decided to adopt an older child? I mean, well, how did that process work? Since you said initially you thought you wanted a younger child, and now you've fallen in love with somebody that's completely not what you were expecting.
So the way that it worked for us, we were looking at grade school originally. My husband wanted an infant, but I said, you know, we both work, and I don't want that screaming baby at night thing. Like, can we do a little bit older? Can we do like maybe elementary? So that's how we started. And then going through the training experiences, you know, that they're trying to open your mind up to, well, the reality of it really is that there's more kids that are older, but open your mind to the potential. So as you go through and you hear the stories of how kids actually get here, and what they've gone up to, and the shortage that we have of parents in general, but especially for older kids, you know, you start, so it crept up, the age kept creeping up, and then I think we were up to like 12 is what we were thinking, and we went to one of those events, and we actually interacted with a child that we thought was 12, but ended up being 16, because a lot of these kids are just developmentally delayed in every way, emotionally, and so that was like, okay, I guess we could, you know, go up to that age. And ultimately what it was is that, you know, my husband and I both, especially being gay men, did not, and he grew up lower income than I did. We didn't necessarily have parents that could provide us opportunities to fully explore maybe interest and learn about what we wanted to be, but we did that as in adulthood. So really what it came down to is we wanted to provide an opportunity for an older child or children to have that freedom, and for us to say, oh, you like activity X, let's go put you in a club for that, or an after school activity, and help them find themselves, their identity. It was not, that's a big thing about adoption. You have to get beyond you as the parent. This is not about you. This is not about necessarily growing your family. That's where a lot of people start. This really is about giving a child an opportunity.
And then you get some love and
Hopefully.
reward and everything else on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it is messy. Not everybody has a happy ending. We definitely have our sad stories. It's been a painful experience, but I would not change it. There's been so much learning and exposure during the process, and
you get to go on great trips and do, you know, the best thing about kids is you get to see the world anew.
That is very true. That is very true.
And so that's like, and you all are getting ready to go on a family vacation now.
Tomorrow morning, yes.
Yeah, so you'll be able to see something again new. So that brings all the joy of it back. My son wants me to adopt or foster a child his age so that he can have he wants a companion.
And that's good when your bio children do, because sometimes they're not so into the idea. So that's exciting.
John's tired of being an only child. I just don't bring in quite enough money to have another child. He's expensive.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about a wide range of issues today. And I want to thank all of you for joining me to talking it through.